Ladies and gentlemen, gits and grats, welcome back. It's another episode of Red-Rupee Cast, bringing you some Dawn of War 2, the Elite mod. We've got some 2.6 action here on Fedred Folly with none other than Man of Faith, aka the infamous Texanius. But he's not actually that infamous unless you're playing against him. He's actually one of the nicest and most well-mannered competitive gamers I've ever had the pleasure to meet. Anyways, against him on the red side is the Warp Spider Exarch, none other than Lomors, who I know nothing about at all, so I don't have anything clever to say about him other than the fact that he's bringing on triple Dire Avengers. No Banshees, no Shuriken, at least not yet for him, and a fairly standard build so far from good old Tex, bringing those double shooters onto the field. Slug is grabbing that power, Warboss and shooters moving into the center of map, about to clash with some nice squishy space elves up here, exchanging shots with them as we get into this match. The Warp Spider's going to have a great time here on Fedred Folly. There are a lot of cliffs and otherwise impassable terrain that he'll be able to warp around on, while the Warboss otherwise just goes around and smacks Eldar with a great big chain axe. Unfortunately, a big old whiff right there, but Warp Spider continuing on his side of the map. Second squad, or wait, no, that's a third squad of shooters now getting purchased right now, and the Warboss is going deep in enemy territory, almost getting suppressed by those base. Yeah, he does actually get suppressed. I'm not sure what the plan is here. He's just shoving that Warboss right down Lomor's throat, and there's not a lot he can do about it. Even doing the War Stomp there next to the garrison, which does do a little extra damage against those Dire Avengers. A couple models went down, I think. Was it just, or maybe just the one? So, one Dire Avenger to two Shooter Boys in that initial engagement. Warboss just hanging out, using those line-of-sight blockers to get into good position. Of course, the Warp Spider Exarch has something to say about that, and now there are just way too many shuriken rifles hurling blasts into this poor retreating Warboss. Don't you feel bad for him? He's kind of outnumbered. That's not really fair. Anyways, lots of Shooter Boys coming in here, and Nob coming down as Tex's first purchase of power right here. Quick tech coming in from Lomors already with three big old generators on the field. Nothing down here for Tex White yet. And the Warp Spider not hesitating to make full use of these garrisons. There's a line of 4 garrisons right down here along this victory point. Burn is coming in for the Slugger Boys, ready to react and burn him out of that house if he does so choose to jump back into that. Dire Avengers just hanging out in the middle, allowing Tex to take that western side of the map completely, while he moves back onto the field with that Warboss, hopefully fixed up a little bit this time around. Warp Spider jumps out of that building, warps away. Still not going to have any real trouble in dealing with those Slugger Boys, considering how easily it is for him to maneuver around the map. Do have a Shuriken weapons team coming out on the field shortly, as these Guardians do take a little bit of fire from those Shooter Boys. Good positioning there from the shooters. Left the Dire Avengers no real choice other than to fall back. Somehow these Slugger Boys managed to get in on some Dire Avengers. The Shuriken's actually setting up now, buying some time for this otherwise in peril generator farm, but a quick burst of suppression fire is going to be about all that's needed. Slugger Boys heading home with just a single model or two. A single model or two. Well, I guess it's 2. Not single at all. Warboss flanking around in position to put a little more pressure on this Shuriken cannon, who's trying to get some suppression down on these approaching orcs, with soon to be a big shooter coming down on the squad as well. Heading into the garrison once again. These Eldar have been using the garrisons with no real remorse at all, keeping now these generators in good position. Again, great use of the line of sight blockers, making sure this Shuriken can't really hit these Shooter Boys. Now double big shooters out here, and that's going to be a lot of damage going down. Grenade forces the shooters out of position, but that Shuriken unfortunately got unset up at just the wrong time, not taking advantage of those out of position shooters, and losing a few more Dire Avengers in the fight. 400 to 398, and neither side sitting on much power. It looks like it might be a bit of an extended tier 1, with Tex dropping, let's see, 40 power on the Shooter Boys. Still nothing on that Warboss, but that being said, with... Wait, hold on, is that... I've lost track of how many shooters are on the field. There's 4 squads of shooters on the field. I guess Tex says, hey, if you're going to build 3 Dire Avengers, I'm not afraid to one-up that. He's going now for 4 Shooter Boys, 3 with big shooters currently, dodging grenades, laying down fire, dodging that Guardian Weapons team, just constantly just jockeying for position around this tree, around that line of sight blocker, making sure no suppressive fire could come down. And where is that Warboss? That Warboss is just hanging back at base. Surprising to see drop micro from a player like Tex, but he's just been hanging out down there for a while. 2 gens finally coming down, and the Warboss, or sorry, the Warboss, not the Warboss, the Warp Spider actually went down there on the western side, right in between those 2 victory points. Apparently pushing his luck a little bit too far. These shooter boys getting just barely outside of the arc of fire, managing to put pressure once again on this side of the map. Guardians moving in. I keep calling them Guardians. I know they're Dire Avengers. Don't get mad at me. I'm not sure what's going on. The grenade comes down on top of the shooter boys and wipes the squad outright. I guess that'll show Tex to buy 4 squads of shooter boys, because now he's back down to 3 anyways. Might be down to 2 if he's not careful. 20 HP going down quickly. Escapes with just over double digits right there. And where is that Warboss? That Warboss is just hanging out. He's just hanging out. He's not overly concerned. For some reason, shooter boys thought they could just run in against all of this. Crazy bleed coming in. That's the 2nd squad of Texas now running home with just a single model. That's going to be expensive to reinforce. Warp Spider is upgraded with the advanced targeting, which increases his damage by 50% and gives him a bit of extra range too. So he's just going to be able to slice through all of these nice light infantry shooter boy squads. Nice point blank grenade there from the Dire Avengers to rout that Warboss, who was otherwise all over that Guardian Weapons team with that chain axe. Anyways, a couple +5s there. The last memory of that shooter boy squad, unfortunately, for us in this particular matchup. But let's see. Now both sides do have some reasonable power income. We can see Men of Faith actually a bit ahead right now with that 1 generator down. But that gets evened up pretty well right here. Falling back, the WOG banner that went up, that these shooter boys and Slugga were hugging in that last engagement. Some pretty severe pressure on that gen farm. Unfortunately, didn't amount to much other than a lone drop generator and a bunch of dead orcs. Flame-throwing, Slugga-wielding boys moving in over here. Taking a grenade to the back there. Only lost a single model. There's a couple orc bits there on the stairs. A bit of a mess, but nothing to be overly concerned about. A good route overall because there's just no other Eldar on this side of the map. Tex has managed to keep the majority of the armor pretty well compressed, as he's just been constantly pressuring this gen farm. Even after everything that has been lost, there's still 2 shooter boy squads up here decapping power. Meanwhile, that Warp Spider ripped apart all the shooter boys, sending the Nob home to round up another crew of boys to send out there. Grenades going down everywhere. These grenades have been spot on all over the place for Lomors so far. And some really excellent control so far from these Dire Avengers. We haven't seen much in the way. Oh man, was that actually the Exarch knocking back the Warboss with a special attack there? Let's see, the Dire Avengers just level 1, the Warboss level 2. He must have been on the move for that special attack to happen. I don't think the Exarch actually has that high of melee skill, but I might be proven wrong. We just did see that Warboss get knocked back there. That was pretty surprising for me. Lomors heading into Tier 2. Well ahead of Tex right now. He's not going to be able to hit that button for at least another 10 seconds or so, and Lomors is well into Tier 2. Not with a huge pile of resources, though. Falcon could be in the cards right now. I think that'd be pretty impactful, considering with the triple Dire Avengers, he could reinforce on the field, give himself even more field presence, and really put some pressure on the map. Although, of course, the Warp Spider does that enough on his own, but surprisingly enough, he's down by about 150 victory points right now, a little over that actually, 440 to 271 as Tex heads into Tier 2. Pulls a couple Nobs out of the ranks here, as we saw during that last engagement, to keep those shooter boys healthy and a bit more resilient, and ultimately makes them just a terror in ranged fights one-on-one. It's going to be all about those energy shields and grenades if these Dire Avengers hope to keep pace in these firefights, but we'll have to see how this plays. The wall, always a possibility as well. Not a lot of tier 1.5 actually. Everyone kind of stuck to just those basic units. We saw the 1 shuriken come in, but a lot of upgrades on both of these, or all of these orc squads. There's a big pile of 4 of them right now, and a Wraith Lord coming onto the field here shortly with Man of Faith. Not a single anti-vehicle option on the field as of yet. So once this Wraith Lord hits the field, there's going to be little to counter it, at least for the time being. Of course, tank busters, and of course the Warboss Power Claw are always a threat. Even that Slugga Boy Nob can be pretty nasty. But of course these walkers do have melee resist. You really want a ranged option to deal with these walkers. Warp Spider jumping around, continuing to be a terrible nuisance to all these Slugga and Shoota boys, even now upgraded with the enhanced warp generator, which lets him warp faster and farther throughout the rest of this game. Even just a quick little short range warp there, allowing him to put some more pressure on the Warboss. The stomp goes down. He does retreat. That's still so much fire. He's not going to make it home, even on the retreat with that increased range resistance. It just wasn't enough. He hung around a bit too long. 3 squads of upgraded Dire Avengers and a Warp Spider rocking those advanced targeters is not any small amount of range damage at all. This big mean walker charging in here, now getting upgraded with that shuriken cannon. This is a tough situation right now for Tex. I'm not sure how he intends to protect this gen farm. He does have some tank busters now on the field, but they're not going to be able to stand against all this piercing damage coming in from the Dire Avengers and the Warp Spider himself, who can just jump in there, tie him up in melee, and get them off the field. It looks like, oh man, was that a squad of Dire Avengers that fell up north while Lomors was microing elsewhere on the map? A tank buster barrage going down. The Dire Avengers heard it coming, managed to get out from under it. Now 2 gens down for Tex, and looking like this third one isn't quite going to make it either. Looks a little hesitant to move in on this force. He doesn't really have a good answer to the shuriken. He's trying to move in on the flank. The shuriken quickly repositions, allowing these Slugga boys, however, to move in there. Still too much range firepower for them to just charge in against all of this, though. The northern squads are suppressed. The southern squad's taking some pressure from the approaching Dire Avengers, and now that Wraith Lord moving in with a shuriken cannon. Just orcs after orcs falling to just, however many dozens of shurikens per second are being hurled into their faces. Warp Spider's now getting called in as well, and that's just compounding the amount of damage that's on the field. I mean, against nothing but Shoota boys and squishy infantry armor, why wouldn't you get some more Warp Spiders? They're getting upgraded with their X-Arc now. I'm sure the aspect upgrade isn't far behind. Tex needs something other than infantry to deal with this threat. Let's see what he's going for here. I mean, I feel like a Weird Boy just isn't going to do it. A Weird Boy would otherwise, I think, be great if there weren't 2 teleporting units on the field, and without the Warboss out here, the Sluggas themselves, I don't think, just aren't enough to rout these kind of interfering units. Everything kind of comes to a pause here as both players are kind of positioning around, figuring out how they need to approach the map going forward, and it looks like, oh man, Tex not even concerned with getting anything else in Tier 2. Heading into Tier 3, he did purchase back 2 of those generators, but not a whole lot of power at the moment. If the Eldar were to move in and push again, I think he'd have a hard time holding that gen farm. I think Lomors has the opportunity right now to just go in and shut down this Tier 3 push coming in from Tex, but now everything's moving in on the backside. These Dire Avengers actually in a lot of trouble. Is that going to be another squad that goes down? Suddenly the advantage is looking a bit less in his favor as a second squad of Dire Avengers falls. Now just the single squad of Dire Avengers supported by the Warp Spiders. Warp Spiders do get routed though. X-Arc is still on the field. I think he needs to get in on those tank busters while the Wraith Lord deals with these Slugga boys. Are the Warp Spiders going to fall as well? 1 HP, 2 HP? No way are they getting out of there. That was a sticky situation and they just narrowly escaped it. Had those Warp Spiders gone down, I think this would suddenly be very much in favor of Tex, just as I was talking about how much Lomors could pressure Tex as he goes for that Tier 3 push. He's suddenly off the map completely. These gens are safe, and now with Tex in Tier 3, those big endgame orc threats are going to come on the field. We could see Nobs, we could see a looted tank. He doesn't quite have the requisition for those kind of things yet, but it's not far off. Most of the requisition on the map is still in the hands of Lomors. Thank goodness, considering that Lomors just lost those 2 ranged squads, and it was really that ranged critical mass that was giving him such an advantage over his opponents. The tank busters blasting away, but of course missing the majority of their shots on that Wraith Lord. Orc army does get routed, and I think it's a little late to put too much pressure on those gens right now. I'm not sure why the shuriken set up so far back. They could have prevented this decap, at least for the time being, from those Slugga boys. 329 to 241 is still in favor of Tex, which is no small feat considering he's playing against the Warp Spider on Fedrid Folly, and I think this is just such a great Warp Spider map because with all these stairways and cliff sides and everything that you can't otherwise path around, the Warp Spider can just be all over your face, especially against things like shoota boys, tank busters, and sluggas with his current kit. I mean, this current kit is just geared for ripping apart orcs and causing bleed as he's so prone to do. But this triple cap now looking pretty great for him. Gonna even out those victory points nice and quick, but thing is, Tex has a tank on the field, and Lomors is heading into Tier 3 himself, so he doesn't have a big pool of power to pull from right now. The Warp Spiders are out here with a Haywire Grenade, and upgrading this Guardian Weapons team into a Bright Lance at the right timing could easily leave that tank falling short, but I feel like Tex is never one to overextend a tank. Of course, I say that right as he just drives it into the face of the Shuriken Weapons team. He knew it was there, and I don't think he had to fear too much from that. That is the first that Lomors has seen of the looted tank, so this is now his opportunity to figure out how to deal with that problem. Let's see if he does choose to upgrade that Guardian Weapons team to a Bright Lance over the Shuriken, but he is now in Tier 3. He's purchasing the Bright Lance. I think that's fine. There's only one real melee threat on the field right now, and that's still the Slugga boys. I don't think the suppression is that important. He could even go for the Entangling Web on that Warp Spider if he so chose to keep those guys completely locked down. But suddenly just sitting in his own base right now. Bright Lance taking a bit of fire. I don't know if he just doesn't have vision on that looted tank or what. What I really want to see is just maybe a crack shot come in on that Bright Lance after a Haywire Grenade goes down on that tank, but oh, maybe he doesn't even need that Bright Lance considering the fact that there's a Fire Prism coming out onto the field. And that tank is going to need to be extremely careful. It doesn't have its upgraded armor quite yet. Boom shot coming down right in the middle of that Eldar army, knocking everything back, leaving that Bright Lance injured and in the middle of everything. It needs to retreat immediately. The Haywire Grenades coming in from those Warp Spiders as the shooters rip apart the Dire Avengers. Wraithlord moving in on the tank, trying to get a couple swings in there. The tank's down to about half health. Orcs are completely routed and falling back as the tank retreats, trying to do everything it can to back away from this Warp Spider before that Haywire goes down, and now all it needs is one more hit. The problem is now is that the Wraithlord's completely committed to this. If it doesn't take out the tank, it can't cease the chase now. All it needs is one more swing. The tank and the tank busters come in, eliminate the Wraithlord at the last possible second. The tank had nowhere else to back up to. One more swing would surely have spelled doom for the tank. But suddenly Lomors without a walker, but with a Bright Lance, I suppose that's something. Lost a couple generators on the backside, got a couple Orc boys in return, but getting routed elsewhere on the map. It's a triple cap during that entire whole tank chase that we saw. There wasn't a lot going on elsewhere for Lomors. Lomors was losing a couple gens. He got routed on this side of the map by the Slugga boys. All that's really happened is the Warp Spider managed to get a decap, 219 to 140 after all of that, and the Fire Prism is now engaging Orcs, knocking back those Sluggas. Got an instant retreat from them. They really can't do anything about that kind of long-range artillery platform that is the Fire Prism. Nobs, oh man, Nobs coming onto the field, and that's just brutal considering the current army position for Lomors. Lomors just doesn't have the ranged firepower to deal with Nobs right now. He doesn't have much in the way of melee control at all, actually. He doesn't have a Shuriken cannon. He upgraded to the Bright Lance. I feel like if you were getting the Fire Prism, you shouldn't have gotten the Bright Lance. I think he should have stuck with the Shuriken if that was his plan. I think the Fire Prism along with the Haywire Grenade should be enough to keep that tank on its toes. We saw even with the Wraithlord, that was almost enough to take the tank out, but with it surviving and then getting the Wraithlord in return, that was actually a pretty huge swing in the favor of Tex. However, he only needs Another couple hundred points down. He's down to 125 himself. Warp Spider charging in. He got himself the Power Blades, which I think he's going to regret once he sees those knobs. The Power Blades are great, but the Warp Spider still can't quite tangle with a dedicated melee squad the likes of Nobs. Warboss just hasn't really done anything this game at all. Tex has been playing pretty much exclusively with his Orc army. Normally we see the Warboss charging around, knocking things over, getting things like that big stomp, that angry bits. But so far he's just kind of been hanging out, taking a nap on this match. Warp Spider's coming in again. Do they have enough? They do have the energy for the Haywire. Fire Prism putting some pressure on the tank. It only needs one more shot. Nobs coming in on the back line though. Tank gets obliterated, spiraling out of control as the Nobs move into a dangerous position for this Fire Prism. Grenade goes down, unfortunately hits more Dire Avengers than it does Nobs thanks to the knockback of the Fire Prism, and the Warp Spiders just deciding they need to get the heck out of there. The Dire Avengers do survive. Another nice supporting shot coming in from that Fire Prism, locking everything down. Seer Council coming out here right now for Lomors, which could be exactly what he needs, because between the Fire Prism and the Warp Spiders, now also the Warp Spider Exarch and the Seer Council being melee threats, I think that's enough to really keep all of these range squads on their toes. The Nobs are down to 3 models at the moment. Not particularly healthy. I think the Seer Council and Warp Spiders could actually deal with them pretty well. Decap's getting prevented on the far side. Unfortunately, the Shooter Boy's taking out that Bright Lance, and it doesn't look like Lomors sees it. He's focused on this side of the map. We can see the Bright Lance still trying to go for the decap there. It does retreat, luckily, and now the Eldar forces in full advance over here on this side of the map. The Warp Spider does get pushed back by the Shooter Boys, but those shooters aren't going to be able to stick around, especially with the supporting shot coming in, knocking down all those orcs, opening the opportunity for that Seer Council to rip them all to pieces. Altar gets dropped in here, and Lomors is just going all out, trying to keep these victory points under all kinds of control, as he knows if he lets this game go on much longer, another tank could hit the field. He's been doing a great job of keeping Tex bled out for the time being. After that tank went down and the Nobs and so many other orcs got obliterated, we can see Tex is sitting at a mere 50 requisition. That said, he's still well above his opponent on requisition income. Altar gets pushed back by a Slugger Boy Global. User Chop is going down right there. A triple cap against Tex, though, and the victory points are quickly evening out here. He has to be very careful with this Altar right now. Altar can't exactly go toe-to-toe with fully upgraded Slugger Boys. Now level 2. The Executioner is upgraded, but I don't think there's any energy shield right now, and has to be careful that User Choppa's Global still active. It hadn't quite finished off yet. And this is where I'd love to see maybe the Entangling Web over those Power Blades. 123 to 120, and Tex has to find a way to push these Eldar back, get that Fire Prism out of here, and take some victory points, because that Fire Prism, along with the Seer Council, is just bad news for anything that tries to approach that side of the map right now. 2 commander units now pushing the right side, and the Warp Spider getting into position to support whatever he can on this side of the map. Painboy now out here up with the Cyborg upgrades. I'd be willing to bet that's probably speed that went down on those Nobs. More often than not, I think that's the route he likes to go. Nobs charging in against the Seer Council. Seer Council pretty well beat up, getting forced off. But of course the Fire Prism covering the escape pretty well, only losing a single model. It looks like those Nobs still in quick pursuit, but manage to be enough of a threat to force off the Fire Prism and the Warp Spider. The Warp Spiders, along with the Exarch, still blasting away at these Nobs. Meanwhile, the Altarch, oh no, the Altarch's not actually capping on this side of the map. 73 to 120, and Tex looking like this might be his last push. If he can't hold it, that's going to be just about everything. Warp Spider getting a bit too brazen right now, going down so fast. 3 squads of upgraded shooters. Let's see, level 3, level 4, and almost level 4. Warp Spider's going in there, putting some pressure on the Tank Busters, keeping that Fire Prism nice and healthy against the only anti-vehicle threat on the field out here. The Nobs still trying to do what they can. Altark does finally get the cap down there, starts picking off those last few tickets for Tex, who finally decides to purchase his Warboss, decides it might be a good idea to get that big tanky fella back on the field. Altark can't deal with 7 orcs on her own, not in the way of Slugga Boys anyways. Unfortunately, these Dire Avengers aren't quite as smart as the Altark, just getting chopped up by those Nobs. Not even chopped up, just brutally smashed by those blunt orc hammers. It's coming down to it. Really, Tex is just doing everything he can to keep the pressure on, but his victory points are still slowly ticking away. He has a 2-to-1 cap at the moment. The Nobs activate meaner and greener. Unfortunately, knocking down as many allies as enemies right there. Warp Spider's just playing the map control game, trying to keep those Nobs at bay as much as possible. Warp Spider and the Altark going to keep this side under control for the time being. Painboy looking for trouble, but not really sure if he can do anything about it at the moment. Tank Busters and Shooters moving in on the Altark, push her back, and I mean, I don't know. It's still anyone's game. Oh no, but the Warp Spider goes down. That's a huge loss right now for Lomors. Lomors needs everything he can to stand against these orcs and keep the rat pressure on. Warboss just hanging over here, camping that easternmost contested point. Got himself upgraded with that big old Bang Bang Hammer, which, I mean, how can you argue with the Bang Bang Hammer? It has the best name in the game and might even be able to knock out a couple of these Seer Council boys. Let's see if the Bang Bang Hammer can contend with the Warlocks. Fire Prism does have some advantage right now, still blasting away at these orcs. Let's see what's going on this side. The Bang Bang goes down. He's just kicking away. That's my favorite attack, is when he just kicks those guys. He doesn't even need to use the hammer. He's got those steel-toed orc boots. That's enough to fight Warlocks, apparently. All you need is a hammer and some tough boots. Oh no, they're just trying to cap desperately. I think he's going to lose the Seer Council to the Warboss because he's not paying attention. I think if the Seer Councils were actually attacking him, they would have taken out the Warboss. Unfortunately, it's all for naught. 58 to 79, and it can still go either direction, with Tex still containing the eastern side of the map with that Warboss. The only real option right now for Lomors is to push up the western side of the map. Man, I wish that Bright Lance was a shuriken cannon. That would change so much right now. Both sides have just been getting bled out. There haven't been any new squads on the field for quite some time. That Fire Prism has been a major thorn in the side of these orcs, but they just haven't been able to quite take it down. Warp Spider continuing to blink around, keep the pressure on everywhere, but it looks like there just isn't enough substantial force on the field to stand against these orcs without any of his Dire Avenger squads left. And only the Warp Spiders. The Warp Spiders are great, but they're so squishy. Oh no, the Altark fell now to the Warboss as well. How many kills has this Warboss racked up? Just hanging over here on this side of the map on his own. He's still fighting out here, but he's fully kitted out now with the heavy armor, the Bang Bang Hammer, and that trophy rack. He takes out one more Warlock. Will the last one survive? It looks like he will. He has plenty of health. But the problem is there's only 38 points left on the field for Lomors. There's Nobs out here, there's Tank Busters. That Fire Prism can't approach any closer than it already is. Without Dire Avengers out here to fix it up, it can't really do anything. Now getting way too close. I can't believe it survived. That was a brazen move by that Fire Prism to push up against those Tank Busters. Now getting healed up, making sure they stay on the field, because they're really the only threat to that otherwise unanswerable Fire Prism. 22 to 58, and Lomors feeling a bit disheartened, it looks like. It was so close. It was indeed. It looks like some friendly exchange here at the end, because it's a 2-0 cap, and with 12 points remaining, there's just not enough time to bring this back around. The win goes to Tex, and just barely, and you know what? It's all thanks to this kitted out Warboss here on this side. I mean, not entirely, but man, at the end of the game, that Warboss pushed back Seer Council twice and obliterated an Altark. I mean, what more can you say about that? It was a bit it was a bit of a misplay by Lomors. I know he was microing hard on this side of the map, but all he had to do was maybe attack move in over here. I know when you're down to just double-digit victory points, it's hard to not just want to pop over. You click on the victory point, you jump back over here, you start microing more. But sometimes, I mean, with the Seer Council, that attack move is all you need. That attack move, even with all these kits, I don't think he actually had the heavy armor at the start of that first engagement, so I think he would have been alright, but with the trophy rack and that heavy armor, what can you do about a Warboss one-on-one? It takes a lot. That Fire Prism might have been what he was looking for, but ultimately the Nobs came in, that Fire Prism was unanswerable, and once all the Dire Avengers fell, there was just no way that Lomors had any way to push forward. It may have just been better to use the Seer Councils on the western side instead of pushing so hard and losing so much wreck to the Warboss, of course, but it's always easier to call it when you're seeing everything from on high and you're not in the heat of the moment. But that was quite a match. I don't even know what to follow that up with. I love watching Tex play, of course, everyone knows. I mean, it's been quite a few matches since I casted Tex most recently. So you can't get on me too much. And hey, it's not even on Caldera, so that's got to count for something. Anyways, that's it for me. Feel free to like, comment, subscribe. I always love hearing from your folks. Feel free to send me your replays. Find me on your favorite social media and all that fun stuff. I'll be streaming on Tuesdays and Thursdays, of course. This is RedRupee. I'll catch you guys next time.